Acquiring just one bigger client can make a huge difference for startups. They can suddenly cover their costs and sometimes even generate profits. However, it can also be quite challenging and risky for startups. Bigger enterprises have long decision-making processes that can last over 12 or even 24 months. There are different decision makers involved, and sometimes they can even switch during the acquisition process, where you have to start building a relationship with a new person and hope that the new person doesn't change his mind. In the following interview, you are going to learn how to increase the chances of success with enterprise sales. Our guest, Tom Blake, has a lot of experience with enterprise sales. He will explain you how to best prepare for sales, how to find the right people to talk with, how to conduct those sales calls in an effective way without wasting your time, and how to create a plan, a strategy to increase the chances of a successful sale. A quick note, there are certain concerns that can prevent a prospect to buy from you. For example, lack of trust, certain certificates, legal requirements, and so on. And we have created a whole list of those concerns and how to tackle them in one of the courses in our community on masterfulhub.com. And now let's move to the interview. Tom, how does onboarding with enterprise client works in general?
I can only speak specifically for Tenderfy. What became really clear early on with Tenderfy is that enterprise customers could really see value in our products. I did actually think this is going to be quite easy onboarding enterprise customers. No, it's not. But the reception was really good. Now, the enterprise customer we've onboarded, they're a publicly listed company. They come through a referral. So I think that always helps, the trust level at the beginning. They was a referral. But my first demo to them was in October. It's now April, and we've only just onboarded that customer. The problem that you have as the startup with the software is that what goes on internally. So when I went back and did interviews with the enterprise customers that we had demoed to that were overwhelmingly positive with regards to the product, what we found is that, I would probably almost consider anxiety. While they loved the product, they were like, well, we're currently using SharePoint for X. We're currently using this HR software. We're currently using this CRM. It was all the integrations and all the current processes that they had in place, which was stopping them from being able to easily go, right, we're ready to move forward. And they kind of the opinion of but this isn't a Tenderfy problem. This is something that we need to do internally. In my mind, I thought, well, it bloody is a Tenderfy problem because you're not onboarding to our software for these reasons. What we went away and did, and I had experience with this from working at a custom software development company, was put together like an enterprise onboarding brochure. And through there, we would go through and we discuss, for example, stage one would be the demo. From there, if they like the product, we can go into their premises. So there was manual work involved. We could go in, we could interview the different teams, find out what their pain points are, review their current software solutions, what they're using. Then we could say, look, you could potentially lose this one. We need to integrate here. It's really the onboarding, which is the harder part of, and so they could love your product. Like, it's fair to say that an enterprise customer could absolutely love your product, yet they still won't onboard, which sounds strange, right? But that's the case. There's also, like, even with this publicly listed company, which we've onboarded, it's one department. So this company has various departments, structures, energy. They're across multiple countries. We are only onboarding one of their departments from Australia. If you try to go, no, we want to do the real big deal to begin with, you're talking, I honestly believe you're talking years, right? Because they're in buy-in journeys. If you can get in where they haven't got to go cross-department, they haven't got to go cross-country and so on and so forth, it does make that process a lot more straightforward and streamlined. The other areas are around sort of ISO policies, what they consider to be sensitive information. But a lot of the pain points is around their current processes, their current systems, and the time it takes for them to make those changes internally. I think it's not just a software solution that you need to provide. You need to provide a solution to what's also currently going on with that organization internally.
It sounds like not an easy task, and you need probably quite some patience and you need to invest quite some time.
100%. And you may think, so you might pick up that enterprise customer and let's say you onboard them in 3 months and you might start thinking, oh, no, it's not a 3-month process. That enterprise customer, I would say they're on a buying journey generally between sort of 12 to 24 months. It just depends when you jump into that buying journey. Like you may have jumped into that buying journey when they've already been looking at different solutions, they're already looking for a product. So you think, well, this is how long, that's not, it's where you caught them during their buying process. So I think if you can find out at what stage they're at during their buying journey, if they're not they've just took the demo because they want to see what's around in the market, you have no chance of onboarding that enterprise customer. You also need somebody who's at that company that has more of the visionary aspects, that they want to be a first user. They want to be your biggest customer. You have to find what are early adopters at enterprise level. Now that's a hard feat, right? Enterprise customers are not generally early adopters. So you need that person who's the decision maker on that other end to be the type of person that wants to be leading and wants to be at the forefront of the industry, not a follower. If you've got a follower, it's a pointless exercise because they're simply not going to onboard. This is, I think, a mistake a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of startups make, including me, is that you think if you've got the best product in the market, that you're going to win. And that's simply not true. You can have the best product and still competitors with significantly inferior product will be able to take that market share. I think product, as much as I know that our product for what we do is the best product in the market, that does not mean that we will win the business, and not at all.
Wow. It seems like not only the onboarding is pretty complicated, but which is much more complicated is to find the right clients, the right decision makers. It's like searching for the nail in the haystack because
100%.
You have very few companies who are potential clients. And then within companies, you need to have luck and find this person if it exists and if this person have the authority.
Definitely. I think it's like reducing the friction as much as humanly possible. But to reduce that friction as much as humanly possible, you need to find out where the friction is with that organization. But I do tend to think with enterprise, it's always the same. It's onboarding. Like some of these enterprise customers, I mean, this is an exaggeration, but it takes 2 months for them to change the brand of coffee that they buy. We still need to go to where our quick wins are, which for Tenderfy is between sort of being very specific, 30 to 50 employees, because they don't tend to have too many existing processes in place. They've not got all these different softwares which they're currently using, and they can make quick decisions. Whereas with the enterprise level customer, they can't make quick decisions, and the onboarding takes a lot of time. But they're not generally time people. They're not like wanting to jump on board. There's no urgent, depending on the product. With Tenderfy, it's not a product that they need to have to continue doing their job. They're already tendering. They've had processes in place for decades in some circumstances. So it's trying to create urgency when they don't actually have urgency, you know?
Yeah, they don't have this understanding of money and time. For them, they get their salary. So if it's this year, it's good. If it's next year, it's also good. They don't care if maybe the company itself loses 100,000 or 10,000 of euros.
This is so true. And you need somebody who's like a champion. When you still talk about enterprise customers, the last thing they want to do is champion a product, right? Bring that product on and then the company it closes down. So as an early organization, enterprise is probably not the right market to target a lot of the time, unless you're extremely well funded. We have found that with certain enterprise customers, and these aren't the ones that we're onboarding, that if you've got VC backing as an example, that opens up doors and it gives you more credibility. And I think the fact of it is, unless you've got somebody at an enterprise company who likes to take risks and likes to push forward with new products, regardless of how well your product fits their market, they're not going to adopt it until you could demonstrate that you've been around for a certain amount of time or that you can build that level of trust with them. I think for us, in our example, I gave them our product roadmap on our initial demo in October. And since then, we've had 4 demos. And with each of those demos after that initial demo, we've been able to demonstrate not only we delivering the features we said, we've also exceeded those features that we said that we would come in. And that built an awful lot of trust. But I can also remember, I thought we was going to get this customer signed off probably around February. Initial demo was October. No, it might have even been before the Christmas break. And then there's different people, right? So it's not just one decision maker. I was initially demoing to the general manager of the department, and then they have like an executive general manager. And they brought about 8 people into that second demo. And literally at the end of that demo, the executive general manager thanked the guy who brought me into the demo because they loved the product so much. Basically said to me, all they need to do is send out an email to the headquarters, which is overseas, to get approval to be able to use the product. And then we'd be moving forward. Then after Christmas, I'm trying to reach out. And then what I found out was that the executive general manager had left the organization. So I had to go through the process again with a new executive general manager. But by then, in all honesty, I think that the general manager had really prepped them about what the product was. They were championing the product. They wanted the product. Like that individual wanted the product because they could see how much it was really going to help them in their role. So that demo was really straightforward. There was a lot more rapport building in that call rather than just demonstrating what the product is. And I think that's really important. People do buy people at the end of the day. If there's no rapport, I think you're always going to struggle to sell your solution to anybody.
How come that you got those clients? Was it intentionally to get enterprise clients, or was it just a good opportunity?
I would say it was a mixture of the two. I didn't think we would be landing enterprise customers at this stage of the organization. And it may be another 1-2 years until we land our next. I don't know how much stead, because once we can put everything live with regards to who the customer is, their logo, that may build trust with other enterprise customers there as well. But it was from a referral. And what I was finding, we was getting demos with a lot of enterprise customers, but while they loved the product, it was kind of like, well, we don't actually make any of those decisions here. That goes across to our head office. It was more bid managers or people at a level where they could take demos and see what was on the market, but they wasn't actually really intending on taking that any further than where it was currently at. When targeting enterprise, it's really important to understand whether your product is the right fit for an enterprise in the first place. And then it's also understanding that they will already have existing systems in place and your product needs to integrate seamlessly with what they've currently got going on. And they're very unlikely to change what they're currently doing. For example, in Tendify, you can manage resumes, you can manage policies. They won't just stop using their existing HR software. They're not going to do that. You need to be able to say, well, we can integrate directly, providing they've got an API that we can use and so on and so forth. We can pull that information in. And you need to take that heavy load off them. You need to remove all of the friction around the onboarding, and you need to take that on board as the startup to be able to onboard them. Otherwise, it's just going to be such a long period of time for them to ever jump on board. These are massive companies that are doing so much. While even a demo might go really well and they might love your product, it's not on their mind. It's not on their day-to-day. They're not coming into work the next day thinking, oh, I can't do my job without that software.
For startups who are maybe listening to this episode, the most important lesson, I think, is you have to really, really consider if enterprise clients are the target audience you want to target in the beginning.
Yep.
It's only suitable for very specific cases of startups where maybe you have great foundings, great investment money, and you can build something quite big and sustainable. But also maybe you have some connections to the right people. It's not like you can just advertise on Facebook.
Exactly. You need to check early as well. If you've not got things like your ISO 27001 as an example, and I wouldn't even say enterprise, even companies at the 50 employee plus level may well have policies which state they do not use any software unless it's got ISO 27001. And that's a non-negotiable, right? It doesn't matter how much they love it. That's the policy. Without the ISO, it's over. So the governance side, which I've had a lot of experience in the past at other companies, you need policies for everything. If somebody says at enterprise, and they'll ask these questions, what's your process for removing data if we cancel our subscription? If you're just kind of making it up off the cuff or you don't have one, I would always say, well, I can just pull my policy up, right? Even if I know the answer, I may start giving them the answer, but at the same time, I'll open the policy or I say, I'll send the policy out. That's what they want to hear, that you've got policies for all of these things. If you don't have a policy for how you handle data, or if you don't have a policy for security, or even a modern slavery policy, they want to see that you've got policies and operating procedures. That's key.
So it's also difficult to launch globally or to offer your software solution globally because you can only focus on certain area on the legal framework.
I think you should anyway. Like, I'm in Australia, which is a small market. So we currently plan to go overseas. Now, if you can't take a percentage of the market where you're based, because I'll get a lot of people say, for example, we're looking at a few different solutions, but what's really good about you is you're based in Australia. We love the fact that you're based in Australia. So I think your home market is always going to be, if you can't take a slice of that market, and I'm going to go to the US, I'm going to go here. I think you're really just deferring the fact that you're unable to sell your product and that you think that there's this butterfly flapping in another country. If you can't take your home market, I think you've got no chance of taking on an international market. Then you've got things like support, right? Customers want to know with us that if there's an issue during the day, they can contact somebody. If we go straight to the UK, we've got nobody. We don't have the team or the infrastructure to be able to handle the level of support that would be required. So I think taking a percentage of your home market first is key to success. And plus, you know that market really well, right? Well, you should. And then when you go overseas, regardless of what your product is, could be a CRM, doesn't matter what your product is, there's always going to be different cultural differences or differences around how people buy. In Australia, it's really quite well known that enterprise in Australia are very slow decision makers anyhow.
In Europe now with the GDPR, it's also really strict with data privacy laws.
Yep.
So it's probably also pretty tough.
Well, this is the thing, right? When people say, where's your data? We're AWS servers. Everything's hosted in Sydney region. Now, and that's what they want to hear. Often in the policy, it will be that the data needs to be held within Australia. And it's going to be the same if you go to the UK. They're going to want to know that the data is held within the UK. And when you're a startup, having that level of infrastructure in place to facilitate global expansion, if you've been fully funded by a massive VC and you've got all that at your disposal, it's a different story. But when we're fully bootstrapped company, we're not seeking funds, although we have been approached by VCs. It's not something that we're doing at this stage. We need to I want to run a profitable business first and foremost. That's what we're setting out to do. We're not currently doing that. We're not currently profitable. Costs are much higher than our income, but we're still fully bootstrapped. While we've onboarded an enterprise customer, we are still finding I wouldn't say we've got true product market fit. We've really narrowed it down now to sort of civil construction and civil consultancy firms because their process really matches our process and they tend to tender a lot. And then when you can get in at the smaller employee level, I think I mentioned before, between sort of 30 to 50 employees, we can get quick decisions. You can literally have them sign up after the demo. Quick decision, straight on board. That's unrealistic once you start going above a 50 employee organization. Discussions need to happen internally, regardless, even if you're speaking to the owner. They're not actually doing the work. So they need to go away, speak to the team. The more decision makers, the harder it becomes. That's why I think with enterprise, if you're in with one department, don't start, once they've got to start going to marketing or they've got to start, it's a nightmare because they don't communicate that well and everything just slows down. So like my take is get that department on board. Then once you've got that department onboarded, do a really good job, show that the customer support's there, get them into your product, make sure they're really enjoying the product, and then they'll open up the doors for all the other departments.
What is the potential of having enterprise clients? If there are so many challenges, there must be probably great advantages. Maybe if you onboard the right client, a big client, that's enough to keep your costs afloat, to cover your costs from the whole startup or something like that.
Yeah, I think the size of the win with an enterprise client is that. But I would also say that you stretch yourselves a bit as well, because when you onboard that customer, like we're a SaaS solution, you can go month to month or you can go annually. However, with the enterprise customer we've onboarded, we did a 6-month upfront term. We had to change our processes to match them again, to reduce friction. I would actually say that, I don't know this, I haven't done all of the forecasts, but I don't think they'll be one of our most profitable customers over that initial 6 months because of how we packaged everything together for them. But when I consider the lifetime value of that customer or the doors that will open across their own departments, I think that carries an awful lot of value. It's still a good deal. I'm not saying we've done this at a reduced rate or anything like that, but we are putting an awful lot in from our side about what we needed to have in place to facilitate them. For me, and you might need to get me on in 6 months or a year to know whether this works, but what I believe is that the majority of people are not early adopters. It's as simple as that. They don't early adopt products. They're followers. The vast majority of people are followers. That's why I think selling to founders is really good, because founders, they take risks. They tend to be early adopters, but other companies aren't. So my plan around this is that we will be able to bring on board other companies in their industry that are smaller organizations just off the back of them, because they're a tier one. So the fact that they're using our software, when we go down to the 500 employee level companies, when they know that organization is using our software, that's really going to assist them to want to onboard because they're followers. And I've demoed to so many of those guys where they love the product and they're kind of going through their decision-making process. I consider them mumps. They go into our mumps folder, get nurture emails, might touch base with them every month or so, give them some new features that we've released. But I mean, one of the biggest selling points there is the fact that one of the industry leaders in your industry is now on board with our software. That I think will push those guys to sign up a lot quicker to our software and build that level of trust. So we're kind of going to use them as a look who's joined our platform, you should too. That's why I think for startups, like you can get really caught up on people that like your product and like going back to them and really wanting to do it. I just think they will join your platform, but not yet. They might be 12 months away. The best thing you can do is just keep going and going until you find those people that are early adopters of software. And it's not many. It's not many.
Are there some exceptions for enterprise clients to be able to acquire easily without them asking the next decision makers in the company? Maybe if the product is very affordable.
This is where you need to find out the buying process of the organization. What I mean by that is that say you're demoing to the general manager who has a company credit card and they have the ability to be able to, they'll generally have a budget and they'll have a certain spend that they can make without going anywhere else. However, when it comes to a software solution, it depends on what they consider sensitive as well. So funny enough, even though we're dealing with tenders, this company does not consider their tender documentation to be overly sensitive because it does become public. When they win, you find out how much they bid and so on and so forth. If this was, let's say, accounting software or HR software, they would be a lot stricter, this organization. But to another enterprise customer, no, it's a software solution. You need to have this ISO. You need to have that. This is our process. Each company is run differently. They all have different processes. They all have different levels of authority about the decisions that can be made. And it's vitally important that you find that out as early as possible. I generally think if I had a great product at one of my companies, you just call for it. No, often they've got meetings that are set. So when it comes to introducing a new product, they can't just like send an email out or call. That happens, for example, every second Wednesday of the new month. And that's when they take new things. They don't rush any decision. There's no rush. There's no urgency. So you've got to find out that process. And it might be, oh yeah, we have a executive management meeting once a month, and this is where we present each idea at that meeting. And then they'll tell you. They'll absolutely tell you their process. You just got to ask. I would tend to say something along the lines of, first of all, find out whether they like the product. Just because they've been nodding all the way through doesn't mean they like it. Do you like the product? Could you see it fitting in with the company? Do you see the value in it? Is it something that you'd like to onboard into your organization? Find that out first of all. Once you've got that, okay, what's your process from here? What is it that you would need to do in turn? And they'll tell you. And if you're speaking to a small company, they might not have a process, but an enterprise company, they have an exact, precise process. They'll be able to say, well, this is what we do. Or they'll say, for example, well, actually, I don't have any say in the software solutions we use whatsoever. I think it's a great product. And I was really interested to see what was in the industry because they work in the industry, but they don't even have any intention of taking that anywhere. So finding during the end of that demo is so important because you do get ghosted. They get ghosted by enterprise the same way that you get ghosted by smaller organizations. And I think it also gives like a commitment for them to come back to you as well. Like when they tell you what their internal process is, I think like it's a business courtesy and integrity thing. It's like, well, they committed that within 2 weeks they was going to come back with some information. And if you follow up after that period of time, I think your response rate back increases significantly.
Can we go step by step for a typical or for a client that you onboarded that could be also relatable for other entrepreneurs and startups and companies? How does it start to work to onboard a enterprise client? So what is the first step?
Okay, so I'll give some examples of where I've had good demos, but they've gone nowhere. And that would be cold outreach. So, for example, connecting with bid managers through LinkedIn, connecting with the industry at that level through LinkedIn will get demos. So you'll get demos from that. But in my experience, it's good for practicing your demos, getting information from the corp. So you get good information because they'll tell you about their processes. So it's good for learning about your product, but it's not going to go anywhere through cold outreach. It needs to come through a trusted source, right? For example, you've advertised in a government brochure or something that they trust, or it's been referred to them. That's when you're starting on a different playing field. I would even say things like AdWords builds a level of trust because they've got buy-in intent, right? You've not reached out to somebody who doesn't have buy-in intent. There's some buy-in intent there. That's a really good place to start. Then the first process is going to be a demo. So then the next thing you want to do is to be able to set up a demo. I used to just love the product. So I'd be straight in, wanting to show it. Now I'll spend over 15 minutes understanding their current processes. What is it they currently do? How do they source their current tenders? What happens when the tender comes in? Where's their pain points? Really finding out about their existing process is key, because then I think if you're just selling the product, you have no chance. You have to sell a solution. So you've got to sell a solution to their problems. So once we know what their pain points are, I can then focus that demo. Less is more with a demo. They don't need to see all your sub features and all these little bits that you think are really cool. They generally have no interest in it. They just want to see the core feature around their pain point. And then I find that they'll ask the questions, and then you can go back to the software, and then it's kind of a Q&A, but me using the product to answer that question for them around the pain point that they have. This is a funny one. Also, they love the fact that you'll say, oh, we can do custom build outs for you. So if you've got custom features, however, one thing to really bear in mind there is at the early stage, you may want to do that because you might be a quick win. You might have not only the enterprise customer, you've also got a 30, 40, 50K custom development job that comes with that customer. However, it's not scalable. I think you're going to later regret it in the sense that when it comes to testing the product, you've got different tenancies that have got different code bases around them. I think the technical side that comes when you start building out custom features for customers is a nightmare at scale. And often what they're actually looking for would be useful for your platform as a whole. So I try to go down the route of, and I'm still learning this myself. I'm learning every day with it. But now I'm on the route of, look, it might be on our product roadmap. It might not be in our product roadmap, but I'll say that we can push it. I'll still try for extra money if that feature is really important to them, and that we can push it forward on our product roadmap, but have it as a feature that's going to be launched across the platform. You don't want the customer to feel that way. So for the customer, I want to understand what it is they feel they need that's completely custom to them. 9 times out of 10, it's permissions. They think that their permission basis and their flow it is unique to them, right? But each customer feels that their permissions and their flow is unique to them. So if you can build out a permissions or an approval process, which they can jump in and customize, you see my hands, but I can imagine it with permissions, for example, the ability to sign off on the tender, the ability to manage resumes, the ability to manage policies, case studies, insurances, policies, certifications, and you can give them full control over permissions. 9 times out of 10, that will overcome what they feel is custom to them. In addition to that, the rest of their custom requirements are often integration. So they are individual to the organization, but that's not affecting your code base. That's an integration. You're still only testing your software as a whole. So I think it's important not to bend over backwards, and important to be able to say no to the larger companies, even though you really want them. And I actually think, while it might sound weird, that builds more credibility than constantly saying yes. Yeah.
I think if you create individual solutions, in the long run, you have to maintain them. And that's the problem. Then you have a very small revenue stream compared to what you have to invest to have it working. And then you make some changes on your software on the other hand. And then it makes some challenges on the individual solutions. So that's what could be
exactly
a problem.
That's spot on. That is exactly the pain point that comes. Also in Australia, if you've got customized solutions, they don't consider that part of your ARR because it's not your scalable. They would take that off. What's your ARR? And they would say, no, they're not going to include that. And they hate service income as well. They only really want to know what your ARR is for your solution, which is SaaS and scalable. The rest of that is not considered.
Might be a good solution for agencies if they want to do that. But if you want to build a successful software as a service startup, then it's probably not the right way to go.
And it's so easy to want to do it because and they love it. They really think that's great because nobody else does that for them. The reason nobody else does that for them because it's not scalable.
What is the next step? So also not only for you, but also internally for the company. So you had this demo, you presented your software.
Yeah.
What comes next?
So that's where we built this in. We didn't have this. And it's a brochure. I mean, you can present it how you want, but enterprise do still tend to love a PDF. The more interactive you make things, they do tend to still like a PDF brochure. You think those things are in the past. They love a PDF. And we have an enterprise implementation brochure. there's around, I couldn't remember the office, but around 12 points on there. And then they'll kind of select which ones they need. We would include things like, we would go to their offices, but often they've got offices all over the world. You can see what they're currently doing. This can also be done remotely. We'll do team interviews to be able to find out current pain points. We'll look at their existing systems that they're currently using to manage their tenders. Then we would present to them, we think that you can use this software. We need to integrate with this one. Really understanding their current tender process for us is key. Because that's often the friction, is that they might love the product, but they've got to change all of this. And that's just too much of a headache, and that will come later. So taking that all off of their hands and saying, well, we'll do all that for you. Because money's never the issue at enterprise. It's never budget, unless you're charging some ridiculous fee. The budget is not a problem. It's the ease of use. They'll happily pay to take away the pain and the friction that comes with implementing your software. Now, we've not had anybody take up all of those features, but it gives them trust that we understand what's involved in enterprise implementation. At the moment, we're doing everything remotely. And then what we do is go through there predominantly around integrations. So with no team interviews so far and so on and so forth, but they like to see that's there. And then understanding their integrations and where they currently have everything, because they will have all of their resumes will be stored somewhere. These are company resumes that they use for tenders, not the individual's resume applying for a job. It's different in tendering. They'll have all of their policies. They'll have all of their case studies. They'll have all of their insurances. Now, they could be anywhere. To get onto the platform, you need to build out that tenant. An enterprise customer doesn't want to join an empty tenancy and sit there and start uploading and creating. They want you to do all of that for them. Now, as a startup, it's so easy to be like, we want to do everything custom because we don't know how much it's going to cost, and we need to know this, we need to know that. Again, it tends to create a lot of friction because now they need to let you know where everything is. You might need to start creating scripts to import everything. You might need to manually do it. What I like to do is package everything together, and we might lose, right? So it might not initially be profitable because we don't know how much. We'll put caps. It will be like, up to 1,000 resumes, up to 1,000. But if they're all stored nicely and we can write a script to import it, it might be a 2-hour job. If it's not, it might end up being a week's job. But we're willing to take that risk at this stage to be able to make it easy for them. So we'll call it like our SaaS Plus. And we'll say, this is our SaaS Plus. We're going to package it all into your subscription. So there's no onboarding fee, right? We're not charging a separate onboarding fee. We're packaging that into their fee. And that seems to be working really well. Because otherwise it's like, yeah, but I need to know what this is and we can't price it because we need to be engaged to know this, and just more friction. Enterprise level, we're willing to take the risk that first 6 months, that first 12 months may not end up being profitable for us. But we're that confident in our product, right, that we know that the lifetime value of that customer to us is going to be worth its weight in gold. Well, not with the current price of gold, maybe silver.
When do you get the first money from the enterprise client?
You've got to do a lot of the consultancy work first. So I think if we go with the enterprise, if they're selecting things off the enterprise brochure, we would then price that for them. So we would go through and we would price the consultations and so on and so forth. And that's before they've accepted the platform. So they're not yet onboarded in the platform. They've not yet agreed for the platform. They're signing off on a consultancy level scheme, if you like, where we're going to go in. This is what we're going to deliver at the end of it. And that's a one-off fee of $4,995, whatever it may be. It's really important to know what you're talking about, but not to start getting involved in where things currently are, what they're currently doing, without being very confident that they're going to be onboarding or you're charging for that to take place. And again, if you're not, most enterprise customers, you'll lose credibility. They're not worried about they would expect to be paying for that level of service. You can't provide that for free. We've only got one enterprise customer, right? So we've not got lots of enterprise customers, and we're still learning how they all but this is what we know so far. They're all different. One enterprise customer is not the same as the other. Their process is different, and you've got to find out what they are, and then you've got to give them that solution.
So you do a few calls for free, not the onboarding, but the demo call. Maybe they say, okay, I cannot make a decision. We have to make another demo call with my boss.
Yeah. No, I'll do all the demos for free. So in this instance, we've done a fair few demos. I think that you can kind of tell by the nature of the call as well. So what I mean by that with this particular organization, and I'm not naming their name, by the way, for certain reasons. I'm not able to name their name right now. With this particular organization, it was very much apologetic that we needed to do another. They was aware that I was spending a lot of time with them that they hadn't paid for, and there was an understanding of that. Does that make sense? If they just expected, then I would stop and I would say, no, like we've already done 5 demos, guys. To do another demo, we're happy to do it. But there's going to be a consultancy fee. We would have to bring something in. But I think as a founder of a startup, if you haven't got any intuition, if you haven't got any gut feeling, you might as well stop because you've got no chance. I think if you had a salesperson, this is different, right? Because this isn't scalable, by the way. If you bring in a salesperson, you need standard operating procedures. This is the process. This is what we do. I think as the founder, and I'm a big believer that all sales, regardless of whether you can sell or not, should be through the founder to begin with. They should be founder-led sales. I'm a huge believer in that. And you've got to be able to trust your gut there. You need to be able to know, well, do I start charging now? Are they taking the piss once for a better word out of me? Are they respecting my time? If they aren't respecting your time, then you've got no credibility with them. They're never going to onboard with you anyway. And I think it's not just your software at that level with the stage that we're at. It's your industry understanding. Because I have such a good understanding of the tender. When we talk, I can talk to a salesperson I ever bring into tender. It's highly unlikely that any salesperson I bring in is going to be able to talk about tenders at a government level. Like I've done a lot of work with government agencies as an example. So I'm able to say, oh, well, this is what Queensland government are currently looking for. And they like that. It's like it's building that trust and credibility that not only do we have a good software solution, he actually has a really good understanding of how tenders work. And this is the problem, I think, for startups when you're trying to find a startup. That's very different to going through some painful experiences yourself and then building a product to solve those problems. Because then you're in industry, you understand the industry. If you just go out there and want to create a software solution because you found out that there's lots of issues in procurement and there's some great solutions around AI, you might be able to build a really good product, but your industry understanding is going to be minimal. And I think you lose a lot of credibility if you don't understand the industry that you're selling really well. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think with international. Once I go to the UK, it's harder. I'm not up to date of what's going on with the tenders in the UK, what the government are doing, what their policy is, what their budget is, how does it work. So once you start going to different markets, you need to then have, I believe, a really good understanding of that market that you're going into. In Australia, it even happens by state. I find it a lot easier speaking to customers that are focused on Queensland tenders than New South Wales, Western Australia or Northern Territory, because it is still slightly different. And my product covers it, but my knowledge doesn't. And that makes a difference in the demos.
The good thing is, if you acquire a client, then you are much safer from the competition.
Yeah.
So you can keep the client for quite some time, usually, probably.
We only launched last October, but so far retention rate, because you can join our platform for free as well. So people that have just jumped on and joined for free have dropped off where they thought it was something different to what it was. They was looking for tenders. Anybody that we've demoed to and bought on, we've not had one customer leave the platform, not one. Acquisition has been nowhere near what I wanted it to be. I thought it would be a lot easier to acquire customers. But one thing I found is that our retention is phenomenal. But I do think that is also the fact that I work closely with them, getting them onboarded. Now, that's key to SaaS solutions, is making sure they're using it. They need to be using the platform. But our retention's brilliant. Like this Ignite Plus program I've been on, I spoke to people that onboarded, say, for example, one guy, I forget the exact dates, but it was around 4,000 customers in the first month, and they've lost, I can't remember what it was, but like 80. And I was like, wow, it's the complete opposite. Like our retention's great, but our acquisition could be a lot better. That's how I feel. And then there's that old age debate. What's better, acquisition or retention? And I think if you're good at acquiring, you want the retention. If you're good at retention, you want the acquiring. It's human nature. You always want the one that you're struggling with.
Do you know what the process was for your client in the back? Which kind of departments did they need to consult? Maybe legal?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So I was dealing with the general manager. They needed the approval of the executive. So you got the general managers, then you got the executive general manager. And then the executive general manager just needed the approval from head office, which was in Canada, around the fact that they could. And he literally said to me, exact words, this will be a tick and flick exercise because we don't consider our tender documents to be sensitive. And that would have been an email out to their IT team. And they said, yeah. I don't know what the email thread was, but I was told, yeah, absolutely, we're good to go. And then I had, which was odd, I had an enterprise brochure download from the form. This was after the acceptance, and that was from another senior executive at the organization. And this is where I think it's really important to be well set up, because I'll tell a little story here, which could have tripped me up. My forms on the site were just coming through as waitlist demo forms from our initial website. We hadn't updated the name of the form, so I didn't know where they was coming from, if that makes sense. So it wasn't book a demo. We don't have a waitlist anymore, but that was what my forms were still labeled. And this had come through the enterprise brochure download, just with the name and the email. And I had actually prepared an email to send to that person to say, hey, we're actually dealing with This is the stage we're currently at with your onboarding, because I knew that the guy I was dealing with was on holiday for a family trip. Luckily, I didn't send, because he hadn't put an inquiry form in at all. He had actually downloaded the enterprise implementation brochure direct from the site, even though that had been sent out. Now, had I sent that email, I think that could have potentially ruined everything. So they'd have been like, well, they've not got much going on there. I didn't even put in an inquiry. So I think it's very important, those small mistakes that could potentially happen. If you lose that level of trust, it would be over before it started. While we'd have the payment, we'd have no customer.
What would be the reasons for you to say, okay, no, I don't want to follow this particular client anymore because it maybe costs too much time?
I think there's so many different reasons. I think for me, it would be that gut feeling of where it's gone. Like, are we progressing? Is this conversation progressing? Are they asking for things that our platform doesn't do? Like, if they're asking for things that we're not, it's not a fit. We're not fitting. They're asking for things that they want to see, which are not on our product roadmap. It's not what our other customers want to see. It's individual to them. I think it's so easy as a founder to want to feel like you've got a lot of traction, you've got a lot going on. I think you really want to get rid of anybody who's not matching your processes really quickly and just clearing them from your mind, from your spreadsheets, from your CRM, getting them out the way. I'd say for me, I would base a lot of that off of the conversations I've had, where it's going, is it making progression, and then just processes. Like, most companies are going to want to see that you have a process, right? So if they're missing demos, if they're missing appointments, if they're not responding, then I would be cutting them off. But I think for me now, we haven't employed any salespeople. And what I now need to implement is a very standard operating procedure. So these things will need to be defined about when that client drops off. Or I would tend to just go to an email, which would be like along the lines of, reach back out to us when the time's right for you. I'm a disbeliever in always bending over backwards for the customer. Like, if I ask ChatGPT, for example, what email should I send out to this customer? They're a really good potential customer. They didn't attend one demo. They did cancel the second meeting, but they didn't rebook in. I had to reach, it would say, oh, I know you may be busy and I appreciate your time. I disagree. You've got to value your time, right? I wouldn't be rude, but I would certainly be strong on the fact that this is our process moving forward. And I would kind of hand it back over to them. Because I think at this stage of my business, it's really important to clear the brain space of these customers. Otherwise, you sit there at night thinking, yeah, but that one might be signing up. That one's really interested. It's all pie in the sky until they actually put their credit card details into your platform, send that transfer across. They're not real. So personally, I think I'm really experienced with qualifying customers. And I think that's what you should be doing really early on, is qualifying them. But depending on the stage of the business, in the early stages, if you've not demoed much before, you know what? You're getting as much out of them as you are them. You might be demoing to someone who has no interest in buying your product, but you're getting value out of that because you're getting feedback, you're practicing your demo skills, you're fine tuning your process. So I think it really varies. And when you're as small as Tenderfy is from a team perspective, you can do that. But as you grow, you can't. There has to be processes. And that's what I'm working on now, is implementing set processes for the sales of the platform. I've got this customer, but they just want to see this, or I don't care what they want to see. This is our platform. But they may well want to see that, but this is our platform. And salespeople then tend to be on the, yeah, but they're going to sign up. They're going to do this if we just do that. No, they're not. Like, that's something that they often say, and you're losing that. You're losing your authority around your organization. I'm not one for that. I'm not one for that at all. I've learned to be more polite when telling people no, but I'm still happy to say no.
That makes sense. Yeah, there is always this hope, but after a while you get this experience and understand, okay, you have so little time actually to spread across different potential clients.
100%. And move on. Like, move on. Hope and potential does not pay your mortgage. Hope and potential does not make your insurance payments or pay for the office or pay wages. And for me personally, it's the brain space they take up. And I think when you're starting out, like, I don't think it's a numbers game either. I think you need to be really targeted in who it is that you're targeting. You need to clear them out. If they're not moving forward, move on. If you've only got a few opportunities, It's heartbreaking as a founder. And I mean, I go through it myself. You lose that one client that you was really sure you was going to land. It was so positive, and then it's a no. And you feel like your whole world's fallen down. And I think it's really important not to allow them to have that control over how you're feeling day to day. So the more opportunities you've got, is on to the next.
I can also imagine that if you have one huge client and no one else, then you are pretty vulnerable. You have all the employees, they are relying on just one revenue stream.
100%. If you're just relying on, I think that's in any business, right? Like I even say it about tendering. For example, I'm a believer, even if you're doing really well with government work, it shouldn't be more, it's my opinion, but I don't think it should ever be more than 40% of your revenue stream. Once you go above that, all it takes is a change of government. This is changing, that's changing. You can lose your work. But it sounds crazy, but government could have a 40 billion project going on and a new government comes in and they'll just stop it. It's crazy. The money that gets wasted in government procurement is beyond belief. It's something we're also trying to help to reduce with our platform. So I think being over-reliant on any one customer is just a very high, as long as you're aware of the risk, I think it's okay, but you should be aware of the risk. Like I've had customers that will say, oh, and we're looking, and I'm not a consultant to them, but I will say, you know, like if they're like, oh, we're looking to go more into government work, we want to stop this. I think government work is great. It's brilliant work. You get paid. It's phenomenal work to have, but it shouldn't be, in my opinion, over 40% of your income. That varies industry to industry. It's a bit of a ballpark figure. But once you go over that 40% mark, your business is at risk. Government change, policy change, and all of a sudden, all that work you had can just stop.
What's your take on warming up the leads? So do you have a pool of people that might be interested in a demo someday, and how do you deal with them?
I said that like a calendar link. If I'm on the phone, so if an inquiry comes through, I will always call the inquiry first. I'll always keep that, I say always, I'll generally keep that conversation below 5 minutes, right? And you tend to find, you know, really early on, if somebody's got lots of time to talk to you on that initial inquiry, they're probably not going to buy because they're not busy enough. The person you call should generally be busy because our solution is for people that are overwhelmed with tenders, right? So I just quickly qualify that, you know, that they're not looking for a platform where they can find tenders. They know that it's a tender management platform, what their current tender process is. But I won't ask them these questions. I'll kind of explain what ours is and check it matches what they do. If so, always try this. I think this is sales 101. Try and book the demo there and then. Have you got your calendar in front of you? Let's book the demo in. As long as they're there, I get the demo booked in on the call with them. Ideally, as soon as possible as well. Once they start getting spread out and so on and so forth, there's much higher chance of a cancellation or a meeting request change. If not, if they haven't got the calendar there, try and judge, you know, are they just trying to get you off the phone or they generally don't have their calendar in front? They generally can't book it in which case I'll just send out a nice small email, which I have templated, and there'll be a calendar link for them to book that appointment in themselves. If they don't book that calendar link in, I will follow up, like I will follow them up. It might be another week for me to follow them up because at this stage, I think there needs to be, even though it might be a nice demo, I'm now at the stage where I'm not interested in nice demos. I need people that are actively seeking a solution. So they will book that demo. You know, if they're actively seeking a solution, they will go through and book that demo. But of course, a little nudge, a little follow up is always handy as well.
You mentioned you are also targeting, or especially now you're focusing more on those smaller companies. How does it work? Like, what are the big differences?
This has taken time. That's part of a founder's journey, is figuring things out, being agile, pivoting and changing as you need to. Land an enterprise customer, that's the holy grail. However, their decision-making time is far too long for a startup to fully focus on them unless you've got lots of funding. Once we go sort of below the 30 employee mark, they sometimes have, but they're not guaranteed to be overwhelmed with tenders. The person that does the tenders, it might be across a few people. They don't do it full time. Once you get down that 11 employee mark, we have got customers on board at that size, but they don't want to spend on software solutions. The 30 to 50 mark is our sweet spot. We've only recently identified this. They don't have lots of other systems in place. They don't have huge approval processes. Generally, the person you're demoing to is the decision maker, or, you know, they're very close to the decision maker. They haven't got to wait 2 Wednesdays to book in that appointment to discuss it. They're going to have the conversation right after the call and book their second demo straight in. And they act really quickly. So they're able to act and they're able to onboard pretty much friction free. And size where cost isn't a massive issue. Like, we would have smaller companies. Oh, that's just over $3,000 a year. You're thinking, bloody hell, you're tendering, mate. That's not a big cost, but to them it is. They're a small business. That's what they're doing in their heads. At 30 to 50 employees, They're big enough to have budgets to be able to spend on software solutions, yet they're small enough to be lean and active in their decision-making process. Now, my plan is to get up to around 100 customers of targeting those 30 to 50s and then drop off from that and go back to chasing the bigger ones and keep that process in place. But for now, because it's easy to go off, and I'm going off now, and you start thinking about these big partnerships and, I can land this partnership and that's going to be huge. Landing customers one-on-one, it's so much, but yeah, it is. But I think it's essential. And I've done this myself. I'm off within partnership talks with huge companies like vendor management companies and so on, but they're so slow. You need to show and you need to pay the bills. You need to onboard customers. So you need to find out who are your customers that can buy quickly and friction-free. Like at that level, it happens. I'll demo, they like the product. I'll have a little conversation at the end. What's their internal process? They'll give it to me. Yeah, I'm just going to have a chat with the other directors. I'm just going to chat to the sales team and then we'll come back to you in the next few days. Tom, say, yeah, right, excellent. Literally, I'll just be on, boom. Someone's just registered for the free plan. That customer. And to begin with, I never thought it would be that easy because it's always so hard. I'm like, it doesn't always happen. But that's taken a lot of hard work, right, to get there. But they're the customers that would jump on, sign up, and off they go.
Thank you very much, Tom. Do you have any last words to our audience?
First of all, if you're thinking of tendering or you're looking to tender, please visit the website, tenderfy.org. If you'd like to connect with me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn, Tom Blake. I believe that the biggest reason, and this is just a bit of advice, that startups is because you give up, right? There are going to be days where, and I have them now, right? It hasn't stopped for me. I still have days where I'm like, sometimes I'll speak to my customers just to bring me back up, right? Because they'll be like, oh, it's great, Tom. I'm loving this. You'll have days. If you need to be resilient, it's not easy, right? Everyone's going to think their product is the best. We all do it. Even if we're experienced, we think, oh, it's a great product. It's never going to be easy. It's going to be extremely difficult. And that's why only a select few people are going to go through to make it. And there's lots of different advice I could give around VC funding and so on and so forth. But I think avoid it like the plague if you can in the early days. You may need it at a later date. I think it's really important for you to be in control of your business if you can. Solve a real world problem and have resilience. You're not going to feel like it all the time, but you need to be resilient and don't give up. You'll know in your gut. You know in your gut. If you've done something that it's not working, give up. You don't remortgage the house, but you do know as the founder, you know whether you're onto something and whatever you've got is good or not. You might lie to yourself in your brain. Your gut will always tell you the truth. That's what I believe.
Very inspiring. That's really amazing advice. I know it from my experience.